California has been losing residents to other states every year since 2019. The reasons are well documented and not subtle. Housing costs that make home ownership mathematically impossible for middle-income families, property crime, quality of life concerns, and a cost of living that has outpaced wage growth for long enough that the calculation has tilted. Some cities in California are losing people faster than others. These are the California cities nobody wants to live in anymore. And here's why. San Francisco, California. San Francisco is the most obvious entry on this list, which is both accurate and somewhat unfair to a city that remains genuinely extraordinary in many respects. The geography, the Victorian architecture, the food culture, the cultural history that stretches from the gold rush through the summer of love through the tech revolution. But genuinely extraordinary in many respects is not enough to counteract the specific conditions that have made San Francisco the American city most associated with the collapse of the urban social contract. The population of San Francisco peaked at approximately 884,000 in 2020 and has declined since. The 2023 census estimate placed it at approximately 808,000, a loss of roughly 76,000 residents in 3 years. That is not a rounding error. That is a neighborhood's worth of people deciding that the combination of factors making San Francisco livable had shifted past their personal threshold. The downtown situation is the most discussed and most visible element of the problem. The Tenderloin and mid-market areas have had concentrated open drug use, visible homelessness, and public disorder conditions for years. These are not new problems in San Francisco, and previous administrations managed them with varying degrees of success and visibility. The post-pandemic period accelerated the deterioration of blocks that had previously been separated from those conditions by active commercial corridors. When those commercial corridors closed, the separation disappeared. Westfield Center, the anchor mall on Market Street, closed in 2023 after its anchor tenants, including Nordstrom, departed. That departure accelerated the already visible retail contraction on and around Union Square, which has been San Francisco's luxury retail heart for decades. Saks Fifth Avenue reduced its Union Square presence. Multiple national retailers closed their Union Square flagship locations. The specific damage is not just commercial. It is to the narrative of San Francisco as a place where the street-level experience of the city justified its extraordinary cost. Office vacancy in downtown San Francisco reached approximately 36% in 2024, according to commercial real estate reporting, among the highest of any major American city, driven by the technology sector's adoption of hybrid and remote work arrangements during the pandemic and subsequent reluctance to return to pre-2020 office occupancy rates. The companies that anchor San Francisco's economic identity are, in practice, occupying significantly less of the city than they did before 2020. The housing cost component requires acknowledgement because it tells a more complicated story than the out-migration alone suggests. Despite losing population, San Francisco real estate prices have not collapsed. The median home price remained approximately $1.2 million in 2023. The people who are leaving are not being displaced by lower prices. They are making the affirmative choice that San Francisco's cost, relative to its current quality of life, is a combination that no longer makes sense for them. That is a different and harder to solve problem than simply building more housing. As urban journalist Scott Schaefer of KQED described the current condition, San Francisco is simultaneously a city in crisis and a city that refuses to acknowledge how serious that crisis is. That gap between perception and reality is itself part of the problem. Stockton, California. Stockton is in San Joaquin County in the Central Valley, and it has had a remarkable and specific relationship with American economic history. It became the largest American city to file for municipal bankruptcy when it filed. Chapter 9 Bankruptcy Protection in June 2012, a distinction it held until Detroit filed in July 2013. The Stockton bankruptcy emerged from a combination of pension obligations that had been promised to city employees during the housing boom years and could not be funded after the 2008 financial crisis collapsed the city's property tax base. Combined with bond debt from infrastructure projects financed during the boom period and the steep decline in city revenues that followed, the city emerged from bankruptcy in 2015 after a court-supervised restructuring that included reductions to certain bond payments and changes to retiree benefits. The structural conditions that produced the bankruptcy and the economic dependence on a regional economy that was slow to recover from the housing crisis did not emerge from bankruptcy when the city did. They remained in place and have continued to shape the city's conditions. Stockton's crime rate has consistently ranked among the highest in California. The FBI's uniform crime reports have placed Stockton in the top tier of American cities by violent crime rate multiple times. The homicide rate, in particular years, has significantly exceeded the California and national averages. The connection between the gang activity that drives much of Stockton's violent crime and the methamphetamine and fentanyl trade that is intensified across the Central Valley is documented in law enforcement reporting. The city has a population of approximately 320,000. It is a significant mid-sized city, not a small town. The median household income is approximately $55,000, compared to the California median of approximately $78,000. The poverty rate exceeds 20%. The city has implemented a universal basic income pilot program. The Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, or NCED, which ran from 2019 to 2021, providing $500 monthly to 125 randomly selected residents for 24 months. That attracted national attention as one of the first large-scale UBI experiments in the United States. Research published on the program documented positive outcomes in employment and emotional well-being among participants. And the program's limited-scale success did not resolve the question of whether direct cash transfers at the community scale can address the structural economic conditions that Stockton faces. The specific problem driving out-migration from Stockton is the combination of high crime and limited economic opportunity in a city whose cost of living, while significantly lower than the Bay Area, is still elevated relative to comparable cities in other states. The rational calculation for a mobile family is clear. The conditions that make Stockton's housing relatively affordable are the same conditions that make it difficult to live in, and the states competing for those families offer more of what they want at similar or lower price points. Antioch, California. Antioch is in Contra Costa County at the far eastern edge of the Bay Area's defined geographic radius, and it has experienced substantial population growth through the 2000s and 2010s as Bay Area workers priced out of closer communities found it to be among the more affordable options within at least nominal commuting distance of employment centers in Oakland, Concord, and the broader East Bay. The growth was real, but the community's capacity to absorb it was limited in specific ways. Antioch's infrastructure, roads, parks, and public safety staffing was built for a smaller city and has struggled to scale with the growth that housing market economics drove into it. The police department has been understaffed relative to the community's needs for years, and the crime statistics, violent crime elevated relative to comparable East Bay communities, reflect both the population growth and the chronic understaffing that came with it. A specific and damaging development in 2023 involved the Antioch Police Department directly. An FBI investigation led to the indictment of multiple Antioch police officers on federal civil rights violations. The investigation exposed a pattern of racially motivated conduct that included racist text messages exchanged among officers over an extended period. The scandal attracted national attention to Antioch in a way that no community benefits from. and it substantially damaged the community's trust in the institution responsible for its public safety. The underlying issue in Antioch reflects the wider affordability quality of life trade-off that defines the outer commute zones of any high-cost metropolitan area. Housing is more affordable at the urban fringe because the conditions are less desirable, and the conditions are less desirable partly because the housing is cheaper and partly because the infrastructure investment has not kept pace with the population growth that the housing attracted. The commute from Antioch to San Francisco by BART and car runs approximately 1.5 to 2 hours in each direction under typical conditions, which is a significant daily commitment for a quality of life that the city has struggled to deliver. Fresno, California. Fresno is the 5th largest city in California, the largest city in the Central Valley, and one of the poorest major cities in the United States by most economic measures. The Fresno metropolitan area has a poverty rate consistently above 20%. The median household income is below both the California median and the national median. The air quality in Fresno, driven by the San Joaquin Valley's geography, which creates a geographic bowl that traps agricultural emissions and increasingly wildfire smoke between the Sierra Nevada and the Coast Ranges, is consistently among the worst of any major American metro area for both ozone concentration and particulate matter. The agricultural productivity of the surrounding San Joaquin Valley is genuinely extraordinary. The crops produced in this region, including almonds, pistachios, grapes, cotton, and dairy, represent a globally significant share of American and world food production. The economic return from that agricultural productivity does not distribute to the cities that sit within the producing region in proportions that generate broad prosperity. Land consolidation in California agriculture has been ongoing for decades. The farms that produce the San Joaquin's output are increasingly owned by large corporate operations and institutional investors, and the farm workers who perform the physical labor constitute the most economically vulnerable segment of the regional population. The city's significant gang population has been documented by law enforcement over multiple decades, and the interplay between gang activity, the methamphetamine trade, and property crime produces conditions in specific Fresno neighborhoods that make normal residential life difficult to sustain. The fire response. Fresno firefighters have documented conditions of abandoned structure fires and related hazards at rates that reflect the vacancy patterns in distressed neighborhoods. The specific environmental problem of Fresno deserves more attention than it typically receives in discussions of California's livability challenges. The air quality degradation in the San Joaquin Valley is not a minor inconvenience. It is a documented public health problem with measurable effects on cardiovascular and respiratory health outcomes in the region's residents. Fresno County children have elevated rates of asthma. Elderly residents with existing cardiopulmonary conditions face real risk from the air quality conditions that are simply part of living in the valley for much of the year, and increasingly for more weeks each year as wildfire seasons lengthen. The people leaving Fresno are not primarily moving to San Francisco or Los Angeles, where the cost of living increase would be significant and the specific quality of life advantages would be real but expensive. They are moving to Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and the Pacific Northwest, places where the combination of employment access, lower housing costs, and measurably cleaner air represents a genuine quality of life improvement. Sacramento, California. Sacramento is California's state capital, a city of approximately 525,000 people in the Sacramento Valley, and it has significant genuine assets. Proximity to the Sierra Nevada, a diverse and growing art scene, a relatively functional light rail system by California standards, and housing costs that are significantly lower than the Bay Area. The context for Sacramento's inclusion on this list is not that it is in crisis comparable to Stockton or failing in the way that specific neighborhoods of San Francisco are failing, but that it is experiencing the specific California cost and quality of life calculation that is producing outmigration from the state generally, concentrated in a city that was supposed to be the affordable alternative to the Bay Area. The Sacramento median home price reached approximately $450,000 to $475,000 in 2023, significantly lower than San Francisco or San Jose, but representing a 50 to 60% increase from 2018 prices that has priced out the lower middle-income families who are Sacramento's natural constituency as an affordable alternative. When an affordable alternative within California becomes unaffordable for the people it was supposed to serve, those people's next step is not another California city, it is another state. The crime situation in Sacramento attracted national attention on April 3, 2022, when a mass shooting in the downtown entertainment district killed 6 people and injured 12 others in the early morning hours after bars closed. The shooting was connected to an ongoing gang conflict. The downtown Sacramento entertainment district had been developed over the preceding decade as a cornerstone of the city's economic revitalization strategy. The state government presence in Sacramento provides employment stability that purely private sector cities don't have, and the California government has not significantly reduced its workforce in Sacramento. Remote work has reduced the state employees who commute to Sacramento's downtown, reducing the commercial economic activity that the downtown's restaurants, retail, and services depended on. Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield is at the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley in Kern County, and it is simultaneously one of California's most economically significant cities. The surrounding county is among the highest petroleum-producing counties in the United States, and the agricultural production of the Kern County portion of the Central Valley is substantial, and one of its most persistently challenging in terms of quality of life metrics. Kern County's petroleum economy has been under structural pressure as California has accelerated its transition away from oil and gas production. Governor Gavin Newsom's executive order in 2020 directed that the sale of new gasoline-powered passenger vehicles be prohibited in California by 2035, and the California Air Resources Board has implemented a series of regulations tightening emission standards and reducing new oil and gas extraction permits. The practical effect on Bakersfield is that the petroleum industry that has been central to the local economy for over a century is operating under a policy framework designed to phase it out, with no equivalent replacement economic activity clearly in development. The air quality in Bakersfield is consistently ranked among the worst in the United States. Bakersfield regularly appears on the American Lung Association's annual Most Polluted Cities report for both ozone and short-term particle pollution, often occupying one of the top 5 positions. The geographic bowl effect of the San Joaquin Valley that traps pollution in Fresno applies with equal force in Bakersfield, and the concentration of oil and gas operations in the surrounding area adds petrochemical emissions to the agricultural and vehicle exhaust sources that define the valley's air quality problem. Kern County has voted Republican in presidential elections consistently for decades. It is one of the redder counties in California, and the political tension between Kern County's economic interests and Sacramento's policy direction has been a consistent feature of California's internal political geography. The residents who are leaving Bakersfield are leaving not just for cost reasons, but because the combination of air quality, limited economic diversification, and the policy environment creates a long-term trajectory that is difficult to argue against. Modesto, California. Modesto is in Stanislaus County in the northern San Joaquin Valley, and it has had a specific relationship with its own cultural image since American Graffiti. The 1973 George Lucas film that was a fictionalized memoir of Lucas's own youth in Modesto gave the city a moment of cultural recognition that has been both a point of local pride and a complicated legacy. The Modesto of the 1960s that Lucas depicted was a real place with a real cruising culture along the main commercial corridor. The Modesto of 2024 is a different city in a substantially different economic context, and the gap between the image and the reality is noticeable. The methamphetamine epidemic that has devastated rural and small city California since the 1990s hit the northern Central Valley with particular intensity, and Modesto and Stanislaus County were not exceptions. The presence of meth in the Modesto area has been documented by law enforcement and journalists covering the drug's effects on family stability, property crime, and child welfare for over 30 years. The specific economic conditions of the Central Valley, agricultural employment that is seasonal and low wage for laborers, limited economic diversification, and geographic isolation from the state's higher wage economic centers, created conditions where meth's appeal and availability both found fertile ground. Property crime in Modesto has been persistently elevated. Auto theft has been one of the specific property crime categories in which Modesto has appeared at the top of California and national rankings multiple times. The combination of the methamphetamine economy's demand for quickly convertible property, relatively lower law enforcement resources for a city of its size, and a geography where vehicle ownership is essential for employment. Access creates conditions that sustain high vehicle theft rates. Stanislaus County agriculture is genuinely productive and economically significant. The processing and distribution economy associated with agriculture, along with the regional distribution centers that have been built along the Highway 99 corridor, provide employment that is accessible to Modesto residents without college degrees. The wages in these industries have not kept pace with housing costs in Modesto, which have risen significantly in the post-2020 period as Bay Area remote workers priced out of the Bay Area moved into the Central Valley and inflated the housing market that Modesto's existing residents depended on. The downtown revitalization effort, anchored by the Gallo Center for the Arts, which opened in 2007 and provides a genuine cultural amenity, represents the institutional investment in Modesto's future that city leadership has consistently supported. Whether investment at the cultural amenity level can address the structural economic and public safety conditions that drive out migration is the question the city has not yet answered. Victorville, California. Victorville is in the high desert of San Bernardino County, at the northern edge of the Inland Empire on Interstate 15, and it represents one of the more specific California urban phenomena, the exurban community that grew explosively during the 2000s housing boom as families priced out of Los Angeles County and the Western Inland Empire found Victorville and the surrounding high desert communities to be among the few remaining locations within nominal commuting distance of Southern California employment that offered anything approaching affordable homeownership. The growth was real, rapid, and built on a foundation that proved to be considerably more fragile than the housing prices during the boom suggested. San Bernardino County became the epicenter of the foreclosure crisis during the 2008 to 2012 period. Communities like Victorville, Apple Valley, Hesperia, and Adelanto, strung along the I-15 and SR-18 corridors in the high desert, experienced foreclosure rates that were among the highest in the United States during those years. The houses that families had purchased at boom prices, often with financing products that proved unsustainable when interest rates or their own financial situations changed, became underwater assets when prices collapsed by 40 to 60%. The communities built to serve those homebuyers went into extended distress. San Bernardino County's bankruptcy filing in 2012, the city of San Bernardino itself filed, not the county, added a layer of institutional dysfunction to the regional crisis. The impacts on county services and the perception of regional governance were significant. The fundamental geographic challenge in Victorville has not changed. It is approximately 85 miles from downtown Los Angeles by freeway, and the commute from Victorville to employment centers in Los Angeles, the San Gabriel Valley, or the western San Bernardino County area ranges from 90 minutes to well over 2 hours in each direction under typical traffic conditions. The promise of the high desert as an affordable bedroom community for Southern California was always dependent on traffic conditions not getting significantly worse, which they did, and on remote work or employment options closer to home not significantly improving as an alternative, which they also did in the opposite direction from what the community needed. The Brightline West High-Speed Rail Project, which as of 2024 has received federal and private investment commitments and proposes high-speed rail service between Rancho Cucamonga and Las Vegas via the I-15 corridor, represents a potential transportation improvement for the high desert region, but the construction timeline, the specific station locations, and the fare structure will determine whether it meaningfully improves mobility for Victorville residents or primarily serves intercity travelers. Property crime in Victorville remains elevated. The city's position along the I-15, a major transit corridor for drugs, goods, and people moving between Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and the broader Southwest, contributes to specific crime categories that affect the community's quality of life and the viability of its commercial district. Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles is the obligatory last entry on this list. The city that functions as the summary of California's difficulties at maximum scale. Los Angeles County has a population of approximately 9.8 million people, making it the most populous county in the United States. And it has been losing residents since 2020. The 2020 to 2023 period saw net outmigration from Los Angeles County of several 100,000 people, in a scale of departure that would have been described as impossible by the urban boosterism that defined the city's self-image for most of the 20th century. The Los Angeles homeless population, approximately 75,000 people, as of the 2023 Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority point-in-time count, is the largest in the United States in absolute numbers. The visible presence of encampments under freeways, along the Los Angeles River, in public parks, on sidewalks adjacent to residential neighborhoods, and in commercial corridors throughout the city and county is the single issue most consistently cited by departing residents as the quality of life concern that tipped their decision to leave. Homelessness is not a problem unique to Los Angeles, but the scale and visibility of it in Los Angeles is unlike any other American city. The city passed Measure HHHH in November 2016, authorizing $1.2 billion in bonds for permanent supportive housing for homeless residents. The implementation of that program produced housing at a rate and cost that became the subject of significant public criticism. Units being built at costs exceeding $500,000 per unit in some projects, years-long delays in project completion, and a total production volume that has not kept pace with either the growth of the homeless population or the political expectations the measure generated. The Los Angeles City Controller's Office and various oversight bodies have documented the implementation challenges comprehensively. The housing cost in Los Angeles County, median home price approximately $800,000 countywide, with significantly higher prices in desirable West Side, Beach, and Hillside communities, reflects a structural supply shortage that decades of planning and zoning decisions have created and maintained. The single-family zoning that protects established neighborhoods from density has been the subject of state-level policy battles, with California's state legislature passing legislation, including SB 9, effective January 2022, to allow duplexes on single-family lots statewide. But the practical effect on housing supply in Los Angeles's established neighborhoods has been limited. The violent crime increase that affected many American cities in 2020 and 2021 was visible in Los Angeles, homicides in the city increased from 258 in 2019 to 352 in 2021 before declining in subsequent years. The perception of public safety, which is related to but not identical with actual crime rates, has remained an elevated concern for Los Angeles residents and has been cited in surveys of outmigration motivations alongside housing cost and tax burden. The specific failure mode of Los Angeles is scale. Every problem that California cities face exists in Los Angeles at proportions that make individual interventions less visible, harder to fund at sufficient scale, and subject to political complexity that smaller cities avoid. The people who are leaving are making the same rational calculation as those leaving San Francisco or Fresno, but in a city whose population size means the departure represents an enormous absolute number of people making that choice simultaneously. As journalist Joel Kotkin, who has written extensively about California's urban conditions, observed, Los Angeles was once a place people moved to from everywhere else. Now it's a place that people move away from. That's a fundamental change in the city's identity, and it doesn't reverse easily. 9 California cities, from the largest and most famous to the mid-sized and overlooked, each experiencing the same underlying calculation at different scales and with different specific factors. The cost of housing, the quality of public services, the visible conditions of public spaces, and the availability of comparable or better conditions elsewhere have combined to produce the first sustained period of California net outmigration in modern American history. Nobody wants to live in these California cities anymore. And here's why. The reasons are specific, documented, and not going away without changes that no one has yet committed to making at the scale the situation requires. Hit that like button and subscribe. More content like this coming.